Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar on architecting for the next generation of retail and e-commerce applications. I am Molly Wojcik, Director of Education and Awareness at Section. We provide the underlying technology that powers the CDN or the CenturyLink CDN Edge Compute platform. I'm also joined by CJ Brewer. CJ, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Molly. Hey, everyone. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering at Section. I've actually been working on the CDN Edge Compute platform for the past 3 years or so now.
Awesome. Thanks, CJ. So today we're going to be talking about what exactly is edge computing and why there's so much hype around it, how it's affecting the retail and e-commerce environment specifically, and how CenturyLink is supporting retailers to adopt edge computing strategies that really deliver on key business objectives. And then finally, we're going to talk through some real use cases, highlighting some of the edge solutions that we've been helping retailers implement on the CenturyLink CDN Edge Compute platform, along with some of the successes that they've experienced as a result. So first, let's talk a little bit about the buzz around edge computing. You can see a sampling here of headlines from industry analysts that are throwing some pretty big numbers and predictions out there, talking about edge eating the cloud, as you can see termed there. And while we're still relatively early in the edge maturity curve, especially when we consider it within the context of cloud technologies, I think it's fair to say that we're in the next evolution of the internet. CJ, from your perspective, what are some of the factors that are driving edge applications?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the last few years, with the edge conversation, a lot of people are kind of taking the infrastructure approach. If you look at kind of the companies in the edge space, they're really developing out the hardware and like, where is the edge going to be deployed? Where I find it very interesting is from like an e-commerce and like application perspective, like having that hardware is fantastic, but how do application developers actually utilize those systems in order to accelerate their applications? That's really kind of where, from an application perspective, engineers are really looking to the edge to deliver their applications, because at the end of the day, you're getting these your compute workloads closest to the end user.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just as we've seen with the evolution of cloud computing, the benefits offered aren't isolated to specific industry verticals. We're seeing a really broad and diverse set of use cases emerge across industries, of course, including retail and e-commerce. Before we talk through specific use cases, CJ, do you want to walk us through exactly what edge computing is and give some context around where the edge is?
Yeah, definitely. So again, if you ask, when you ask where is the edge, you'll probably get quite a few different answers based on who you're talking to. With kind of the CDN Edge Compute platform, we, again, have taken an approach more on a software level rather than the infrastructure. But however, the infrastructure is still the place that is defining where these edge locations are. So this kind of slide here, when you're talking about edge from our perspective, you can actually utilize like the existing cloud providers like Amazon, Azure, Google, bare metal solutions, etc. Moving even out of those data centers, even closer to the end users by utilizing things like cell towers, so like the base of 5G cell stations, and even getting as close to the end user as running a edge device inside of like a retail store or within your house. And then again, even a little closer, like you might even be able to utilize the actual user's device themselves. So from our perspective, anywhere that we really have access to running this compute, we are able to define these as edge locations. And this, again, kind of tying back to like the original hardware play of edge. When you have these edge the hardware edge providers really building out this infrastructure, you can get a really, really distributed system for your applications.
Yeah, and so obviously the performance benefits are what we tend to focus on there as you move those workloads closer to the end users. But there are some other benefits that span across security and scalability as well when we look at those distributed architectures. But when we think about retail specifically, we're really seeing digital experience as the new differentiator. Take, for example, a recent shopping experience you had. It was likely online, right? I know that all of my shopping tends to be online these days. And factors such as speed, personalization, and full digital immersion are really these differentiators that brands are looking for to stand out with those shopping experiences. And diving a little bit into the performance factor, and speed, site speed specifically, I like to think of, an in-store shopping experience where I may be standing in a checkout line for 5 to 10 seconds. And in a physical store environment, that's probably no big deal, right? But when you think of waiting 5 to 10 seconds for a page to load, chances are, as a shopper, you'll get fed up and abandon cart or go elsewhere. In fact, a study conducted by Amazon showed just that. You'll see that stat on the screen here, that for every 100 milliseconds in page load time, they saw a 1% loss in sales. So when you think about those numbers relative, in this case, to the volume of sales that Amazon does, the dollar signs add up pretty darn quickly. And then, on top of the changing competitive landscape, we've also started to see the lines between business and technical units in retail organizations blur. E-commerce managers and marketing departments are increasingly more responsible for some of those supporting technologies. And on the flip side, engineering teams, are more tied to revenue targets. So maybe, CJ, I think it will be helpful if we can better understand how retailers are specifically looking to edge computing to help innovate in these areas.
Definitely. Yeah. So I guess a use case of edge that has actually been around for quite a few years now, probably about 20, 30 years actually, is content delivery networks. Content delivery networks historically have really sat in the kind of HTTP delivery of web applications, and really specifically in our use case, e-commerce. So when you're looking at breaking down that speed factor, you truly have to understand what is going on under the hood and where can I focus my efforts to truly drive those speed wins. So this kind of diagram right here actually shows when you're looking at an e-commerce website. So if you type in like www.amazon.com, there's a few technical components that go on in order to actually understand where should I be sending these requests. Won't go too deep into that today. But at the end of that life cycle, we're actually just sending HTTP requests over the internet. It's hitting some server somewhere, and then that server will then respond with content. So when you're talking about CDNs, when they sit within that delivery chain, they're able to bring some of that content closer to the end user. And historically, it's really been about bringing like images and static content closer to your end user. But really, with some of the applications these days, you really need to be focusing on the dynamic content of your web application, as these are the components which really drive like some of the metrics around speed that like SEO bots look at and things like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we understand that speed is super important, especially as we saw those numbers as they translate to revenue. But I think, and understanding the context of the HTTP request is super helpful. But I think it might be helpful for folks to understand how to, like, where to begin to assess the performance of their applications.
Yeah, definitely. I think understanding the performance of your web applications and how are your users actually experiencing your web app is very important to understand where to start, because you might just not necessarily know, like, hey, I need a CDN. Like, why do you need a CDN? Or why do you need a platform such as the Edge Compute platform? So really taking a step back and stop looking at solutions, but rather what are the problems, so that I can construct my kind of search in a solution to a very narrowed approach, and then you'll, at the end of the day, truly be able to drive some good results. So that said, where do we look? So there's a few different places you can look. The first one are tools called synthetic measures. Tools like Pingdom, New Relic, Web Page Test, any kind of company in that space, you can really utilize their tool sets to test your website. The reason we call them synthetic, however, is that when you test the website using these tools, they're really the tests themselves are initiated from kind of a lab environment. These lab environments might be like a data center in AWS. I'm pretty sure, like New Relic, for example, runs their testing from a AWS data center. When you're talking about those AWS data centers, you're probably on like an EC2 instance, and that EC2 instance is going to be limited to the network throughput and network speeds allocated to that machine. It's going to be bottlenecked by the resources actually allocated to running that test. And again, really tying it back to that lab environment. But what's really nice about synthetic tests is that the output that it provides to you, obviously there's done some analysis on the results, and they really present the data back to you in a way where you can understand from a high level what are the key components of my website's performance do I need to focus on to improve the user experience. So synthetic models are really good for that reason. However, to truly understand how your users are experiencing your performance, and these, again, going back to some of Molly's points, speed directly impacts like conversion rates and revenue. So you really want to understand, how are my users experiencing the website? Because they might have different browsers, they might have different device types, they might have different network throughputs. So using tools like real user monitoring, which you can find like in New Relic, or there's other tools out there as well. But these are essentially JavaScript snippets that you put into your website, and they actually measure the user's performance metrics on an individual level. And then that data is then collected in a centralized system. So you can see things like median page load time, 95th percentile page load time, and like break down those metrics into like, what was the time to start render? When was the visually complete and the fully loaded? And using that data and determining like, all right, what device were they using? And things like that, to truly understand like, all right, when I make changes, how is this directly impacting my users? And again, kind of one of the really important things here is that on November, I think it was 4th, 2019, Google actually made a change to the algorithm of their SEO bots. And they were really looking at the impact to their SEO score based on a lot of those performance metrics that like the real user monitoring tools grab for you. So like, I've actually seen firsthand when they kind of made that algorithm change, it directly impacted the amount of users that were landing on some of our customers' websites, because they really never took the time to truly understand some of those key performance metrics, and it directly impacted their SEO, and that's kind of the last thing you want. So that said, how is the CDN Edge Compute platform truly solving some of these challenges? So we've done a lot of work into, well, understanding where is my website slow. We've kind of come to the table with this solution. So when we first developed this solution, there was kind of three key components that we needed to focus on to truly drive some really excellent results. First one is really intelligently choosing where do we run workload to bring that compute and content closest to the end user. So we have some technologies built into our platform which actually do that for us. So it actually analyzes like where are real users at coming from and accessing my website. We'll actually make decisions on where to run your workload. Once we kind of have where do we run the workload, we want to make sure that we're running the right software in those locations for my specific app. Again, kind of one of the use cases historically has been CDN. When you kind of choose a CDN, you kind of get locked into the software technology that they have built into the entire infrastructure. And that might not be the best software solution for your application's needs. So bringing that kind of choice of software back to like you as an application developer, definitely a key component to what we do. And finally, once you have the right locations and the right workloads, how do the application developers actually interact with this system? So we've taken a really careful approach in terms of how you configure these systems. And we're utilizing just kind of normal DevOps tool sets to be able to configure these things today. And we'll get a little more into that in a few more slides. So let's talk a little bit about how we can actually deliver so many different edge locations. Today, the CDN Edge Compute platform sits on existing cloud providers. So like Amazon, Azure, DigitalOcean, Google, Packet, RackCorp, and other bare metal solutions. We're able to utilize their existing infrastructure to spin up our software to create this kind of edge network. And we're able to do so by utilizing some of the projects like within the Cloud Native Foundation, like Kubernetes and Docker, to really orchestrate that workload. Won't go into too much technical detail on exactly how that works, but it is interesting to see those technologies used to assist us in this edge compute platform. And then definitely working on launching this software within the actual CenturyLink network itself. And as I'm sure we're all aware, the CenturyLink network is quite vast. So it brings a lot more additional location options to the table when analyzing like where do we run this workload. And again, kind of going back to one of those previous slides, actually being able to use like data centers running in the base of 5G cell towers is really where this industry is going. So that's kind of the location side of things, and touching on the software components. So actually, I personally believe that this is one of the bigger key value propositions that the CDN Edge Compute platform brings to the table, specifically in terms of e-commerce, because we have so many different tools available to really accelerate and secure your website that as new software comes into the marketplace, we're actually able to, instead of saying, hey, like, you need to go switch providers completely to utilize this new software. Bringing this kind of more modular edge component into our platform allows us to run a variety of different security solutions. And again, for e-commerce specifically, a lot of people use the performance solutions that we have available in the marketplace. Don't really actually have a slide on this one, but the DevOps side of things, we actually, to configure these things, we actually utilize Git repositories. So tools that your normal web application developers use on the daily to like version control their own apps. We're also kind of taking that and allowing you to run kind of quote unquote infrastructure as code within those Git repositories. And then the CDN Edge Compute system itself will handle the deployments and the orchestration of the workload under the hood. Again, won't get too much into those details today, but it's a nice little key. It's nice to worth noting.
Yeah, and maybe just one note to throw in there. I think, you know, for e-commerce and, you know, there are so many different facets of e-commerce managers when it comes to the application side of things. And what that DevOps tooling does is allow teams to really focus on just writing and deploying their code for their application, and takes away a lot of the headache in dealing with orchestrating those workloads and making sure that they're running in the right locations at the right time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, like the CDN Edge Compute platform is delivering automated distributed computing, which is not the easiest thing to roll out yourself.
Yeah, certainly.
So kind of tying it back to that HTTP request flow, the CDN Edge Compute platform actually sits directly within that HTTP request flow, just like a normal CDN would. But the value and kind of end results that you can gain by utilizing those key value propositions that I just went through are really what is driving results at the edge. And that said, Molly, can you introduce us to one of our retail use cases?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for going through that. I think it's helpful to understand, you know, what's driving applications to the edge and how exactly the CDN Edge Compute platform fits within that landscape and is helping solve for a lot of those challenges. One of the use cases that we'd like to walk through that's specific to the e-commerce space, and I think a lot of folks will be able to relate to on this webinar specifically, is a large online beauty retailer that came to us at first for a really specific kind of traditional CDN type workload challenge, and has since really evolved in pushing more workload out to the edge and has become a real innovator in the space. So CJ, do you want to kind of walk through what they first came to us for and how they've evolved?
Definitely. So yeah, it was actually pretty interesting to see this customer grow over time. Really, when they first came to us, they were like, well, we need to solve performance needs, which again, a lot of e-commerce companies are always trying to solve. But they really just started out with a basic normal CDN type solution. So they utilized the CDN Edge Compute platform really just as a normal CDN, and it was running Varnish Cache. So they utilized Varnish Cache, which was kind of an emerging software for accelerating web applications at the time, and utilized this technology to speed up their website. And I actually worked like directly with that team, and we were able to get some pretty solid results. I think we were able to improve their page load time from about, I think it was about 7-8 seconds down to about 2-3 seconds. So some really good results there. And what was really nice, and one of the value propositions that the platform brings to the table, is that as their application needs grew over time, the platform is also able to adapt to those changes. So this is actually what their infrastructure looks like and architecture looks like today. Instead of having kind of a centralized system, they started embracing the concept of microservices. So they have a bunch of different microservices running within their hosting provider. They're actually able to utilize our kind of routing capabilities to route traffic to each one of those services based on certain components of the request. So that was actually one of the first steps that they did. And then they said, well, I have all these microservices. Which ones of them can I actually move out within your platform to run alongside my Varnish cache to really, again, get that compute closer to the end user? So they were able to take their actually headless e-commerce solution and deploy that using the Node.js module directly in line with their caching modules as well. As you can kind of see here, they have a variety of different solutions. They have image optimization, so on-the-fly image optimization in this HTTP delivery chain. They're utilizing SiteSpect, which does A/B testing for their users. They're using ThreadX as their web application firewall, and some other kind of interesting use cases using things like OpenResty. They've actually running multiple layers of Varnish cache in here to do a variety of different things. Won't go too deep into what those exactly do today, but just kind of, as you can see, their architecture was able to really grow with them as they started to utilize the CDN Edge Compute platform in more detail.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been super exciting to see what they've been able to achieve with the Edge Compute platform. And as you can see, they're covering a pretty broad spectrum of solutions within the platform itself. So are there other, obviously this is a great example that shows, a lot of different ways that you can use the platform. Are there other examples specific to e-commerce that you can think of that might be relevant for this audience?
Yeah, for sure. So one of my other favorite customers that works with the CDN Edge Compute platform, they have artist websites. So like a bunch of those pop singers, when they want to put on like a t-shirt and like sell that through their e-commerce store, they actually have gone as far as to integrating our kind of DevOps centric API into their CI/CD pipeline to construct their Edge platform when an artist wants to spin up a new site. So it's like, let's say artist A or artist B signs with this record label, and they were able to now say, well, all right, record label, like make me a e-commerce website so that I can sell my merch on there and obviously make money. So when they said, hey, like I'm going to use this kind of admin system to go and launch all the components behind the scenes in order to run the application, and at the same time, when it asynchronously spin up the CDN Edge Compute platform to support and accelerate and secure that application that they were spinning up at the same time. So that one's a little more kind of on the DevOps side of things, but again, at the end of the day, like they were just trying to solve performance and security needs by utilizing these tool sets and bringing a lot of that compute and content closer to the end user.
Yeah, and I think that customer specifically, I seem to recall them also like very quickly changing out web application firewall providers.
Yes, yeah, that was actually a really fun day. We they were like, well, our contract expired with web application firewall A. We see that you guys also run web application firewall B. And that actually makes like our security team already validated it, and we want to now replace Web Application Firewall A with Web Application Firewall B. And we want to do it on all 250 some web applications that we're running with you. And what's kind of going back to that like DevOps side of thing, we were able to switch out Web Application Firewall A with Web Application Firewall B within a matter of like 30 minutes across every single one of their applications. And kind of what was really nice about that specific solution, they were essentially able to go into blocking mode kind of day one and get that immediate protection and not have to go around to a bunch of different servers and rip out that software for a new one. So that was a pretty cool use case to watch.
Yeah, so awesome. Such time savings achieved along with, just that full DevOps experience. Some additional use cases that we've seen retail and e-commerce customers adopt edge architectures for our server-side A/B multivariate testing, like CJ was talking about with SiteSpect in this specific example on the screen here. Virtual rating room is another one. Server-side rendering, headless commerce is another one that CJ had mentioned. Progressive web app delivery, and then even language translation at the edge. So a lot of different broad and diverse use cases. And I think it's fair to say that there are so many that we haven't even contemplated yet. So as a technology provider, it's a really exciting time to be helping customers, retail customers specifically, navigate and implement these different edge strategies to really optimize their applications. At the same time, all of these optimization opportunities coupled with the unique needs of an individual application mean that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, as you can probably expect after walking through a couple of these examples. And so when it comes to providing a solution to meet these challenges, that's why the CDN edge compute solution is so powerful, and being able to really provide a solution that allows teams to the flexibility, visibility, and control that they need to really be able to leverage it for their unique application requirements. I think that concludes today's webinar. If you're interested in learning more about CDN edge compute or talking through a specific use case for your application, please reach out to your CenturyLink representative. And if you're interested in more resources like this, you can visit the URL shown here. I want to thank all of you for joining today, and thank you, CJ, for lending your experience and expertise.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.